Normally, when a champion gets a VGU, the primary goal is to retain as much of the original's identity while retrofitting their kit to contain more skill expression and playmaking potential. The reason for this is to preserve their current player base, since even if the champion in question struggles to be popular, completely overriding them not only runs the risk of alienating those players who likely developed an attachment to that champion, but it kinda defeats the purpose of it being a rework. You might as well just make a brand new champion at that point. However, on rare occasions, there presents an opportunity for a complete reimagining of the champion's core philosophy while technically still adhering to their expected playstyle, and arguably no one represents that more than Galio. Prior to getting a VGU, Galio was one of the most awkward champions in the game, being theoretically very effective but practically seldom if ever presenting a scenario where his specialty would prove to be effective. Following a full visual gameplay overhaul though, he's since become a far more significant presence, both against the original category of champions he was meant to shut down, and so much more, all while having a fairly straightforward kit that doesn't overstep its boundaries. While I don't consider it the best designed VGU from a gameplay point of view, I find myself respecting Galio as a champion concept very much. So for today's episode of the Rework Retrospective, we're going to be looking at the Colossus to break down one of the rare moments where thinking outside the box paid off in spades. Fitting with the archetypal approach to early champions, Galio was by all accounts the magic damage counterpart to Malphite. While the latter excelled at shutting down all physical aspects, the former was conceptualized in response to all magical aspects. Granted, he wasn't the only one of his kind, as Cassidy was a more offensive response against AP, but between the two of them, Galio was definitively more geared towards shutting down mages, and at a glance he was executed fairly competently. In hindsight, however, picking Galio against an AP-heavy team wasn't as intuitive as picking Malphite against a full AD team. But to get to the reasons why, we had to first take a look at his abilities to break down the fundamental incongruity between them. Beginning with Runic Skin and Bulwark, his passive and W, Galio would gain bonus ability power equal to his magic resist, enabling for some offensive returns on defensive purchases, not unlike how Malphite can deal progressively more damage by building armor, but I would say it was applied more effectively on the Rockman. Either way, the ideal was that Galio would take very little magic damage while dishing out damage of his own, enough to usually pose a threat to squishy champions, aka most mages. Bulwark may have been an extremely overpowered ability if we were to base it on gold efficiency alone. For 4 seconds he could grant himself or a nearby teammate bonus armor and magic assist, and for the duration, anytime the person took damage they would heal, with the total amount being fairly significant. Ostensibly speaking, the functional purpose of Bulwark did make sense. 90 bonus armor and MR was simply overpowered and multi-purpose, being an excellent tool against any semblance of burst damage, of which mages were commonly known for. Mages were also very well known for their high rate of poking and harassment, which is where the regenerative part came into play. Against dot users like Brand, Malzahar and such, Galio would be able to receive the full healing, and at a 120% AP ratio, it was a fairly significant amount. These two abilities were intended to be responsible for quote-unquote shutting down mages, and like I mentioned, superficially they seem to have delivered on that relatively effectively. But therein housed the initial problem. Only half of Galio's kit was constructed around countering mages, the other half didn't really play into anything whatsoever. It was sort of like the problem Sion faced, where half his kit was meant to play into one thing, and the other half played into the other without any real noticeable through line connecting all of them. Resolute Smite was an area blast attack that damaged all enemies in range, and while the projectile may look like it would damage enemies in a straight line, it's more like a Xerath Q in function. Now, every champion is entitled to a consistent, easy-to-use damaging tool, so there's nothing inherently wrong with this Q. Righteous Gust on the other hand was a bit more out of place. This one was a straight line skill shot that damaged all targets on the way, and it would leave an air current that gave bonus movement speed to allies inside, very similar to Hui's WQ. On its own, the skill shot was pretty effective at dealing damage and giving the team a boost in tempo, but in the context of Galio's kit, it wasn't very good at doing much of anything against the champions he was expected to fight. Sure, the extra move speed would allow him away into melee range to then cast his ultimate, but like I said, there was hardly any synergy with the rest of his kit, if any at all. The only one I could find is that Q and E would give a melee champion like Galio an answer to ranged champions, which to be fair they were good at doing so. Even so, there still wasn't a proper sequence on one to another. For the sake of comparison, while I do not consider Malphite a well-designed champion in the slightest, the reason Malphite's a more practical counter to the champions he was meant to was because each of his abilities directly shut down the vast majority of physical damage playstyles. Most AD champions are melee in nature, and having close quarters combat with his W empowering basic attacks and E crippling attack speed made him effective at doing so. Q, on the other hand, was an answer to ADCs, most of which were immobile, so he would be able to walk up to them and smack them to pieces. The same applied against melee champions. Unfortunately for Galio, while Runic Skin and Bulwark made him effective at tanking enemy mages, his offensive tools, Resolute Smite, Righteous Gust, and Idol of Durant, were not the most effective at fighting enemy mages either. Q and E effectively turned most of Galio's matchups into a snowball fight, both sides chucking range at each other. But if that were the case, you could respond against mages throwing stuff at you by also playing a mage yourself. It was hard to come up with a scenario wherein Galio was an option head and shoulders more efficient than fighting fire with fire. Realistically, the main appeal with Galio was the sheer, and I emphasize sheer, busted power of Idol of Durant, arguably one of the best ultimates in the history of League. It was for all intents and purposes known as Absolute Zero that you could not escape out of once you were caught in it. Mind you, it did much less total damage, but considering all enemies caught within or any enemies that walk into it get taunted for the entire channel time, it's practically guaranteed, and the damage is still quite significant. On a small tangent, one of my favorite I'm a Cutie Pie videos to this day is that one where he plays Galio and keeps one-shotting Ezreal over and over again. But honestly, that's how it was. Galio's main job was to be an AP bruiser who taunts everyone and blows them up. However, even that wasn't enough. Galio really couldn't get much going for himself for the average player. Combining Bulwark with his ultimate made for a deadly combo wherein he could tank enemy hits and dish it right back at them like an Amumu that actually did damage. But the rest of his gameplay consisted of a steady yet unremarkable neutral game, constantly chucking projectiles over and over, ultimately being a less effective mage, especially given the high cooldowns on his attacks and the fact that he had no real consistent area pressure to speak of aside from his ultimate. Granted, he wasn't on the level of useless as a Yorick or anything like that. Individually speaking, all of Galio's abilities had their place. It's just for the purpose they were meant to serve, stopping mages, there could have been better ways to implement them. When conceptualizing his VGU, the focus was to retain as many of the good parts in his ult kit as they could, while trying to find better ways to connect everything together for, again, more playmaking potential and agency. Some might find it counterintuitive for Galio to be a melee champion given most mages were ranged, but that was because unlike Kassadin, whose job was to actually assassinate mages, Galio's whole principle was to protect against them. See, lore-wise, Demacia is staunchly anti-magic, and Galio was created as a line of defense, hence why he takes a more reactive approach to warding off AP champs, whereas Malphite's more aggressive against AD. That was a stance the champion redesign team took when working on him, but as the saying goes, the best defense is a strong offense, something old Galio was sorely lacking: initiation. Like I said, he could take it, but there had to be some way for him to dish it out. He was supposed to guard against magic damage, but he didn't do a very good job being a bruiser or tank for your team. Hardly anyone thought of him as much of a melee threat when his ultimate was on cooldown. Eventually, however, they found a way to address both parts of him. At a surface level, Galio's VGU may have appeared like an overloaded mess, being able to do everything and seemingly having no weakness. To that I say you're not wrong. It took a while for them to finally bring it to a healthy spot, but conceptually speaking, they did a phenomenal job executing on a more competent frontline base for a tank. He still had a consistent damaging tool in the form of Winds of War, providing him with a stable way to not only wave clear but also attack enemies up close or from afar. I think in this case, the percent health damage is appropriate since older tanks were known to fall off due to their inability to scale offensively. Shield of Durant is the best part of him, full stop. The biggest issue with Galio was that he suffered from Shen syndrome. Once exhausting Idol of Durant, he was just a really weak champion, so they scrapped his old ultimate completely to redistribute his power budget throughout his kit, and Shield of Durant is a much better defense implementation than Bulwark. Passively carrying a shield against magic damage gave it the same functional properties as Granite Shield, offering a way to survive against enemy harass in neutral. As for the active, Galio's bonus stats became damage mitigation with a charge that would increase the range and taunt duration of the attack. Another issue Galio struggled with was the absence of any crowd control in his base kit, so by taking the taunt out of his ultimate and bringing it to his W, he now had a consistent way to defend or attack. To this day, Shield of Durant is one of the most powerful basic ability crowd controls in League, while simultaneously not feeling too oppressive. It may not carry the same fear factor as Idol of Durant, but then again it shouldn't be, being a basic ability. More importantly was that Galio's W made him a veritable tank, as he could use it to literally draw aggro on himself to protect his team from being attacked or to set his team up for attacking. One other problem old Galio had was that he was missing a way to gain access into the enemy team. The bonus tempo in Righteous Gust was not enough for that either, so they gave him a traditional engage, Justice Punch. Justice Punch is like a Diet Malphite ultimate that can only attack one target, but to prevent it from being too strong, they added a mountain of conditions to it. First, that it could not dash over walls, and second, it forced him to step back, making it easy for you to stop him from using it to escape. In exchange, you had a fairly long-range dash with good speed and coverage, leading to a perfectly serviceable engage tool. With this, Galio had a number of basic but reliable combos at his disposal. He could use Justice Punch to get in range, then Colossal Smash for some DPS. While the enemy was CC'd, he could charge up his W for a fair length of time to follow up with a guaranteed full damage Q. Alternatively, he could do it the other way around. Should he already be close, Galio could open up with a taunt and then basic attack, then Justice Punch and then Q for more or less the same effect. Galio went from a champion with no combo potential to one with a very strong trade combo that also carried a great deal of hard CC to it. Of course, the final thing they had to take care of was the whole protection thing, and Hero's Entrance was a genius method of achieving that. It's a semi-global ultimate that can only be used on teammates, identical to Shen's Stand United. He gives his main target and all allied champions in range of the impact zone his W shield, and then arrives at the spot after a small delay to knock up all enemies in range. I love the concept of this ability. Defensively, the W shield buys Galio's teammates time to survive just a bit longer against magic damage until he gets there, and for everyone else, the AoE knockup that soon follows acts as a deterrent, discouraging anyone from pressing the attack so as to avoid getting knocked up and counterattacked. A global teleport also carries the implication that if a teammate is getting jumped on 2-1, Galio can come to their aid and even the playing field. Amidst all of that, Hero's Entrance can be used offensively too. Galio could apply a huge amount of pressure against the enemy team by emboldening his teammates to attack, since he can follow up on their engage at a moment's notice and chain CC the enemy team or turn a 2v2 into a 3v2. Such a powerful ultimate is inherently kept in check by the very condition that Galio cannot use it on himself. He has to play for the team. But considering the sheer payout that Hero's Entrance has, it's a caveat well worth paying for. Galio's basic abilities alone make him sufficiently capable of handling a fight by himself, so from a balancing standpoint, it's good that his ultimate's reserved only for the team. In essence, thanks to his VGU, Galio went from a boring AP bruiser that spent the whole game throwing Q and E and maybe pressing ultimate during a teamfight, to one of the most dynamic and skill-expressive wardens in the game. His new W and E give him a ton of ways to apply pressure to enemies both defensively and offensively. His Q and passive offer a stable amount of damage in his kit, and his ultimate may be one of the best teamfight ultimates in the game for the sheer range of use cases it has. At the same time, he doesn't feel overly cheesy or unfair to play against. Galio lost a sizable amount of damage to acquire the crowd control, mobility, and tools he has. That being said, they didn't remove the option entirely. Yes, you can play Galio purely for utility and go full tank, at which point your W makes you next to invincible against magic damage, and the shield you give to your entire team with ultimate makes you an amazing frontline base, but you'll do far less damage. Conversely, Galio can also build AP and risk being a bit squishier, but he can put up a much bigger fight. Tanks are notoriously boring to play because of how limited their build options and playstyles can get, which is why I think it's a good thing for tanks to have the option to switch between playstyles. In the case of Galio, sometimes you need a dedicated frontline for your team, and sometimes you can get away with building AP. The early issue with him shortly after getting reworked was that he could do both by just going MR, so they had to nerf his base damage and scaling a ton. To compensate though, they made AP Galio a viable option as well. I also enjoy how, despite being mainly geared towards battling magic damage, they designed him in such a way that he's not entirely helpless against physical damage. Generally speaking, AD is more common than AP in League on account of auto attacks being physical in nature. The extra crowd control they brought into his kit affords him the ability to play for disruption even if the enemy team is all AD. Galio's CGU is a keystone example of a champion where changing their fundamental experience actually proves to be a benefit. While people complained about Aatrox or Swain losing too much of their identity even if it meant better practicality, Galio losing a lot of his old identity for his current one not only made it more practical, but more enjoyable to play. Do I miss old Galio Ultimate? Absolutely, but from personal experience, having a Galio on your team is just reassuring, you know what I mean? I don't think I'd ever complain about a Galio on my team, he's just so handy. But what do you guys think? Do you agree or disagree that Galio was a well-designed rework? Let me know in the comments down below. That's it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Rework Retrospective episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.